When Hakeem Jeffre passionately declared "tax the rich" on national television, he never imagined what would follow. President Donald Trump soon revealed startling information about Jeff's luxurious $1.2 million Brooklyn condo and his unbelievably small property tax bill, just $200 a year. The studio went silent. Across the country, people began to question everything they thought they knew about Jeff's fight for the poor. What Trump said next would expose political hypocrisy like never before. Bright studio lights shone on Hakeem Jeffre as he leaned into the microphone, confident and composed. His voice carried with conviction. "Tax the rich. Pay your fair share." The audience offered polite applause as cameras zoomed in to capture his fiery tone. Jeffre smiled, pleased that he had once again taken a public swing at Donald Trump. For weeks, he had ridiculed Trump, calling him a man who only served billionaires while ignoring ordinary Americans. Tonight, he believed, would be no different. But what Jeffre didn't know was that Trump had been waiting, listening, and ready. America's 45th and 47th president walked onto the stage calmly. His expression steady but his eyes sharp, the kind of spark that often came before one of his headline-making moments. The crowd quieted. Trump adjusted the microphone and smirked. "Folks," he began, voice steady but cutting, "we just heard Mr. Jeffre talk about fairness and taxing the rich. But what if I told you that the man shouting 'pay your fair share' pays less in property taxes than most of you spend on groceries each week?" The audience froze. A wave of murmurs spread. Something big was coming. Jeffre chuckled nervously, trying to dismiss it as another one of Trump's distractions. But Trump didn't blink. He leaned forward, locking eyes with the camera as if speaking directly to every household in America. "Hakeem Jeffre lives in a $1.2 million Brooklyn condo," Trump said slowly, his words heavy. "A luxury apartment in one of New York's wealthiest neighborhoods. And do you know what he pays in property taxes each year? $213. He paused. "That's right, 230. Gasps filled the studio. A woman covered her mouth. A cameraman momentarily lowered his lens, unable to hide his disbelief. Jeff's calm expression faltered as the weight of the revelation settled in. Trump's tone sharpened. "This man lectures you to pay more while he takes advantage of a tax break meant for struggling families barely keeping their lights on. Meanwhile, firefighters, teachers, and police officers in New York are paying $5,000, $9,000, even $10,000 a year in property taxes. And Jeffre, the supposed champion of the poor, pays less than I spend on a round of golf at Mar-a-Lago." The room erupted, some in outrage, others in silence. Jeff's jaw tightened. He tried to speak, but Trump pressed on, pointing toward the cameras, addressing millions watching at home. "You've been lied to," Trump said firmly. "This man who claims to fight for you was part of the New York State Assembly when he voted to expand the very loophole that keeps his taxes low. That program now costs New York City $1.4 billion a year, money that should fund your schools, your roads, and your police." Uneasy murmurs filled the studio. Even moderators, often quick to challenge Trump, sat still, faces pale. Jeffre shifted nervously in his chair, his hands trembling slightly. He glanced toward the teleprompter, but there was no script to save him. From the crowd, a middle-aged man shouted, "Hypocrite!" The word cut through the air. Another voice whispered, "My property taxes are $8,000, and my house isn't even worth $200,000. The disbelief quickly turned to anger. Trump leaned back, his voice steady but heavy with finality. "Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just hypocrisy, it's betrayal. A betrayal of every hardworking American who believed his lies." The studio fell silent. The camera zoomed in on Jeff's face. Sweat glistened under the harsh lights. He forced a smile, but his lips quivered. In the control room, producers debated cutting to commercial, but they didn't. The nation was locked in. Trump leaned forward again, voice low but deliberate. $213, folks. That's all he pays. You pay more for car insurance. You pay more for a month's rent. And this man, this fraud, dares to lecture you about fairness." The words hit like a hammer. An elderly woman in the audience wiped tears from her eyes. "My taxes are $7,500, she whispered. And I live in a tiny house in Queens. Jeff tried to respond, but his voice cracked. Trump didn't let the moment slip. They call me the bad guy, he said, hand on his chest. But I've been fighting for you, and now the truth is out. By then, social media had exploded. Clips of Trump's revelation spread across X, Truth Social, and Facebook. Hashtags like Joshio Hypocrite Hakeem and Josh Tax Scam trended within minutes. Inside the studio, the atmosphere felt electric. Audience members gasped, whispered, and shook their heads. A man shouted, "Shame on you!" pointing directly at Jeff. Security braced, uncertain what might happen next. Trump's gaze never left the camera. They tell you to sacrifice while they feast. They pretend to fight for the poor while living like kings. And who pays the price? The truckers, the teachers, the single mothers. That's who? His voice cracked, not with weakness but conviction. The audience felt it. So did millions watching at home. Jeff fumbled through his notes, hands shaking, his usual confidence gone. That's not true, he muttered. But the crowd drowned him out. Anger and disappointment rippled through the room. People realized this wasn't just about politics. It was about trust. Trump stood tall, his voice firm. This isn't about numbers on paper. This is about your children's schools, your police stations, your future. While hardworking Americans struggle, Jeff profits off a program built for the poor. That's not leadership, that's betrayal. Gasps swept through the audience again. A mother in the second row clutched her son's hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "This is why we love Trump," she whispered. "He fights for us." Jeff sat stiffly, his face tense. He tried to laugh, but the sound came out hollow and awkward. Trump didn't slow down. He placed a hand firmly on the podium. "They call it fairness," he said. "I call it fraud. And America deserves the truth." The audience erupted, some clapping, others too stunned to react. Across the nation, people leaned closer to their screens, hearts pounding. Everyone knew this moment was the start of something far bigger. The moderators exchanged uncertain glances. They'd seen Trump spar before, but tonight felt different. This wasn't a political jab. It was an unmasking in real time. Cameras caught Jeff's hand shaking as he gripped a glass of water, his once confident voice gone. Trump pressed on. "You know what's worse? He didn't just stumble into this loophole. He helped keep it alive. Back in the state assembly, he supported expanding the same policy that lets him live in luxury while paying pennies." The crowd gasped again. The words carried weight, proof, figures, details no one could deny. In living rooms across America, families shook their heads. In Ohio, a truck driver muttered to his wife, "We paid $6,000 in taxes. He pays $200. That's betrayal." She nodded, tears in her eyes. Trump was right all along. Jeff tried to interrupt, but the moderator stopped him. The truth was louder than words. For the first time, Jeff looked lost. Trump's tone softened, but his conviction remained. He gestured toward the audience. "Parents working 2 jobs, veterans fighting to keep their homes, single moms buried under rent, and Jeff, the man shouting fairness, pays less than your weekly groceries." A heavy silence filled the studio. It wasn't just outrage anymore, it was heartbreak. The hypocrisy felt personal. In the third row, a firefighter bowed his head as his wife whispered, "We pay $9,000 a year. For what, for him to cheat the system?" Trump continued, his voice steady. "I've been audited more times than Hakeem has paid taxes, and I still paid millions, fair and square, because unlike him, I respect the people who built this country." The room went silent. Trump's words hung in the air, heavy with truth and anger. For once, this wasn't about politics. It was about betrayal, fairness, and the dignity of ordinary Americans. Jeff's eyes darted nervously across the stage. The confident politician who had entered with swagger now looked exposed. His voice trembled. "This is a mischaracterization. It's complicated." The audience groaned. Trump raised his eyebrows. "Complicated? Tell that to the cop who just paid $8,000 in property taxes. Tell that to the teacher working nights to make ends meet. There's nothing complicated about the truth. Jeff tried again, stumbling over half-finished sentences, but every word only made him appear smaller. Meanwhile, Trump grew stronger in presence, not through arrogance, but through clarity. His voice filled the stage, carrying the weight of millions who felt ignored for too long. On social media, reactions poured in live. Trump just destroyed Jeff. Is this even real? 230 in taxes? I'm shaking. The moderators sat frozen, unsure how to steer the show back. America wasn't just witnessing a debate. It was watching a mask come off in real time. No one would forget what they were seeing. The air in the studio grew heavy as Trump raised a sheet of paper. I don't just talk, folks. I bring proof. Here it is, Jeff's property tax record. $52 a quarter, $213 a year. Locked in since 2007. The moderators hesitated, their earpieces buzzing with anxious producers, but no one interrupted. The crowd gasped louder than before. This wasn't opinion, it was evidence. Jeff's face turned pale. He stammered, That's an abatement program. Trump cut him off. Meant for low-income families, not millionaires with political salaries. Do you see the betrayal? He thundered, his voice echoing across the room. At home, families cried. In Michigan, a mother shook her head, whispering, We paid $10,000 last year while he cheats the system. Her teenage daughter asked through tears, Mom, how is that fair? The truth was no longer an argument. It was reality, raw and undeniable. By now, millions were glued to their screens. News outlets scrambled, anchors whispering off camera while X and Truth Social flooded with outrage. Inside the studio, a young teacher stood up, trembling. I work 2 jobs and pay $7,800 in taxes, and he pays $213. She broke down, covering her face. Trump turned to her, voice soft but steady. Ma'am, you're the reason I fight. For hard-working people like you, not for career politicians who fill their pockets while lying to your face. His words blanketed the room in silence. Heavy, emotional silence. Jeff sat trapped, boxed in by the truth. His attempts to respond were drowned by cries of disbelief and anger from the crowd. Across America, blue-collar workers, single mothers, and veterans all felt the sting. Hypocrite Hakeem flashed across thousands of screens. This wasn't politics anymore, it was personal. Trump straightened his tie, his voice rising with authority. Hakeem Jeffre has mocked me for years, saying I make the rich richer and the poor poorer. But look who's really robbing you. Look who preaches fair share while paying nothing. He pointed directly at Jeff. This man stole from every firefighter, every teacher, every single parent who paid their taxes honestly. That's the swamp, and I've been draining it since day one. The audience erupted. Some clapped, others sat stunned. Emotions collided, anger, heartbreak, betrayal. A retired cop muttered, He should be ashamed, as his wife wiped away tears. Jeff sat frozen, hands clasped, eyes down. The self-proclaimed champion of the poor looked powerless. Trump, in contrast, stood firm, less as a politician and more as a defender of ordinary Americans. He paused, letting the silence linger before raising his hand as though before a jury. You know what makes this worse, folks? He didn't just use the loophole, he protected it, expanded it. Back in the New York State Assembly, Hakeem Jeffre voted to keep the 421A scam alive. And do you know what that costs the people of New York each year? $1.4 billion. The word billion hit like thunder. The audience buzzed with disbelief. Some booed. In the second row, a mother whispered, That's money that could have fixed my son's school. She wiped her tears with shaking hands. Jeff stared down at his lap, unable to meet the cameras. His silence said everything. Trump leaned back, his tone steady but burning with conviction. That's not leadership. That's theft. And he dares to call himself a fighter for the poor? Folks, it's disgraceful. It's betrayal. And tonight, the truth is out. Cameras panned across faces heavy with emotion, anger, shock, heartbreak. A veteran in uniform whispered, I served this country. I paid my dues. And this man mocks us all. Trump nodded toward him. That man served with honor. He paid his taxes, never asked for a break, and the guy lecturing him on fairness pays less than a cable bill. Does that sound like justice to you? The crowd shouted together, "No!" The sound shook the walls. Jeff flinched. A woman clutched her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Tears streamed down her face. All those speeches? All lies. Trump's tone softened, almost fatherly. I fight for you, the forgotten men and women, not for hypocrites who lie while living like kings. The crowd rose to its feet, cheering. The room no longer felt like a debate. It felt like truth catching fire. By now, Jeff looked undone. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by panic. Tugging at his collar, he stuttered, You don't understand the context. Trump cut in sharply, his voice booming. The only context here is betrayal. You told Americans to sacrifice while you laughed your way to the bank. You defended a scam that robbed your own city while pretending to care about the poor. That's not context, Hakeem. That's corruption. Gasps and applause filled the air. Some chanted, Shame, shame! The moderators looked helpless, caught in the storm unfolding live. Across the nation, people leaned closer to their screens. In Texas, a single father slammed his fist on the table. Trump's right, they've lied to us for years. His teenage daughter hugged him, whispering, Finally, someone's saying it. Jeff slumped in his chair, eyes downcast. Trump stood tall, carrying not just his own words, but the frustration of millions who felt betrayed. The crowd wasn't just listening, they were feeling. Faces burned with anger. Others streamed with tears. A nurse in the front row raised her voice, shaking. I pay $6,300 every year, and he pays $213? The room gasped. She covered her mouth, tears spilling over. Trump looked at her with calm compassion. That's the truth, ma'am. And you're not alone. Millions of Americans are crushed by unfair taxes, while politicians like Jeff rig the game for themselves. It's not just unfair, it's immoral. She nodded through sobs. The cameras lingered on her face, capturing raw emotion broadcast live to millions. Jeff stared at the floor, silent and defeated. The man who once shouted fair share now looked like a child caught in a lie. His silence echoed louder than any defense. Trump continued, his tone firm, rhythmic, and commanding. This isn't about numbers anymore. This is about betrayal. About the American people being used and deceived by those who claim to fight for them. As his words thundered through the studio, phones across the country lit up. On Truth Social, hypocrite Hakeem shot to the top within minutes. X flooded with memes comparing Jeff's $213 tax bill to grocery receipts, gas bills, even Starbucks orders. Backstage, a producer whispered urgently into his headset. It's everywhere. Clips are going viral right now. Screens blinked with headlines. Trump drops bombshell, Jeff's $213 tax on 1.2 condo. In living rooms across America, families argued through tears. In Pennsylvania, a father pointed at the TV. We gave up vacations over time, everything to pay our taxes, and this guy steals from us. His son whispered, Dad, Trump's fighting for us. The father nodded, eyes glistening. Jeff tried one last time. This is being misrepresented, he said weakly. The crowd drowned him out with jeers. Trump raised his hand, silencing the noise. The people deserve answers, but Hakeem can't give them. Because the truth doesn't need spin. It needs courage, and he doesn't have it. The lights seemed brighter now, highlighting the contrast between a humbled Jeff and a resolute Trump. Trump's voice carried with the confidence of a man standing firm in his mission. Folks, I've been audited more times than this man has paid in property taxes. And every time, I stood tall, because I was building something for America, for jobs, for families, for you. But this man? He's building nothing but lies. The audience burst into applause, many rising to their feet. A firefighter stood and saluted. The cameras caught it, and millions watching felt chills. Jeff rubbed his temples, beaten. His arrogance shattered. His silence said everything. Trump closed with words that echoed across the nation. You can't call yourself a champion of the poor when you're stealing from them. And tonight, America has seen the mask fall. The studio roared. The applause wasn't just noise, it was filled with raw emotion from people who finally felt acknowledged. The tension inside the studio cracked like a wave breaking. Members of the audience began to speak out, no longer whispering but shouting with anger. "Fraud!" One man yelled. A woman near the back raised her trembling voice. "My child's school has broken ceilings and no textbooks, and he's stealing from us." Jeff tried to raise his hand, hoping to calm the growing outrage, but the audience had turned against him. His once smooth delivery and polished tone failed completely. He appeared small, isolated, and cornered. Trump lifted his hand, commanding silence with a presence that filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this is the truth. The man who says tax the rich is cheating the very system he claims to defend. He isn't paying his share. He's making you pay his bill." Gasps spread through the audience, followed by applause that grew louder by the second. People rose to their feet, clapping and chanting truth again and again. Jeffre's face turned pale, his lips pressed tightly. For years, he had mocked Trump on television. But tonight, those years of confidence had collapsed into minutes of exposure. Outside the studio, the reaction spread nationwide. In diners, bars, and homes, people were glued to screens, their meals forgotten. Tears ran down faces as reality settled in. In Ohio, a grandmother whispered to her granddaughter, "I sold my jewelry last year to pay property taxes, and this man paid $213." Her voice cracked as her hands trembled, gripping her granddaughter's tiny fingers. Trump's words echoed far beyond the stage. "This isn't about politics," he said. "It's about honesty, fairness, and respect for the American people. Tonight, you've seen the mask torn off a fraud who claims to care while living like royalty on your sacrifice." News outlets scrambled to adjust coverage. A breaking headline flashed. "Trump drops bombshell on Jeffre live." Social media erupted with fury, hashtags multiplying by the second. Inside the studio, the crowd broke into chants. "Shame! Shame!" their voices shaking the room. Jeffre's hands trembled. The confident lawmaker who once strutted onto the stage now looked like a man desperate to disappear. Trump's voice rose above the noise. Sharp, clear, and controlled. "They say I protect the wealthy, but take a look at the record. Look at him. This is the man draining your paychecks while hiding behind slogans." He pointed at Jeffre. "You want to preach fairness? Start by paying your own taxes. Start by living the values you demand from everyone else. Until then, don't lecture the American people. They're done with hypocrites." The audience roared again, rising to their feet. Tears and applause mixed in the air. A construction worker in the front wiped his eyes, whispering, "Finally, someone stood up for us." His teenage son hugged him. Both overwhelmed. Jeffre sat motionless, his lips a thin line, face drained of color. Every attempt to defend himself had collapsed. His silence spoke louder than words. Trump stood tall, not boastful, but steady, carrying the weight of millions who felt wronged. The studio and the entire nation sensed they were witnessing a defining moment. The chants grew louder. "Shame! Shame!" rolling through the hall like thunder. Security watched carefully, but this wasn't chaos. It was truth breaking free. The anger in the room wasn't directed at Trump. It was toward the years of deception they felt. A man in the third row raised his fist. "I pay more taxes than him, and I live in a one-bedroom apartment." His voice cracked with grief and rage. His wife beside him wept. "We skip meals to pay our bills, and he's laughing at us." Trump turned toward them, his tone solemn. "This is why I fight," he said. "Not for myself, not for the elites, for families like this, families who sacrifice everything while politicians like Jeff live like kings." Jeffre sank deeper into his chair, shoulders slumped. Cameras zoomed in on his pale, expressionless face, the crowd's anger weighing heavily on him. The chants only grew louder. "Truth! Truth! Truth!" echoing through the studio. Across America, daily life paused. Supermarkets turned up their TVs, diners fell silent. In living rooms, people sat forward, hands clasped, tears in their eyes as they listened. Online, the clips spread like wildfire. Posts read, "213 hours in taxes. This broke me. We struggled for years while he cheated the system. The sense of betrayal felt personal, raw, and unforgettable. Trump's voice filled the quiet between chants. This man didn't just cheat the system, he helped design it. He voted to expand the loophole that keeps him rich while crushing you. That's not hypocrisy, it's daylight robbery. The crowd gasped. A mother holding her baby whispered, "That money could have built hospitals, schools, and he took it." Tears streamed down her face. Jeffre rubbed his temples, trying to hold composure, but his silence confirmed everything. Each second without a response was another blow. Trump's tone lowered, measured, and resolute. This is what the swamp looks like, and this is why we're draining it together. The audience couldn't stay seated. People stood clapping and crying. A retired teacher sobbed, "I worked 35 years and lost my home to property taxes, and this man pays $200. God help us." Trump looked toward her, his voice soft but steady. "Ma'am, your pain is America's pain, and that's why I'm here, to give you a voice, to bring you the truth they've hidden." The room went silent, broken only by her quiet sobs. Even the moderators looked shaken, their professionalism fading. Jeffre appeared broken, his hands trembling, his eyes distant. He had no defense left. Trump remained firm, his tone unwavering. "They call me the problem," he said, "but the real problem has been here all along. Politicians like Hakeem feeding off your hard work while pretending to fight for you. Tonight, you've seen it for yourselves." The audience erupted again, applause and tears filling the air. This wasn't just a debate anymore, it was truth laid bare. The stage felt like a courtroom, with the people as the jury. Trump leaned forward slightly, voice sharp and controlled. "This man calls you selfish for wanting to keep your paycheck. He says you're greedy for questioning his tax hikes. But look at him, living in $1 million condo, paying less in taxes than you spend on groceries in a week." The crowd gasped. A father in the front shouted, "My property tax is $9,000. I'm barely surviving." His voice cracked, his young daughter clutching his arm, sensing his pain. Trump pointed toward him. "This is who I fight for," he said. "Families like his, hardworking Americans crushed under unfair taxes while Hakeem Jeffre laughs his way through loopholes he created." The words struck like a hammer. Tears welled in the eyes of many. Even the moderators had nothing to say. The hypocrisy was undeniable. A middle-aged nurse stood up, trembling. "I've worked double shifts for 20 years. I pay nearly $12,000 in taxes, and this man, this so-called defender of the poor, pays $200. It makes me sick." Her voice broke as she began to cry. Trump walked toward her slowly, his tone compassionate. "Ma'am, you are the backbone of America, and you've been betrayed by those who should have protected you. That's why I'll always fight for you." The audience erupted in applause, though many still wiped away tears. The cameras swept across faces etched with grief and disbelief. Jeffre sat motionless, stripped of the moral ground he had long claimed. On social media, hashtags like Hypocrite Hockey and Truth Wins surged worldwide. The nation wasn't just watching, it was grieving years of deception, finally unmasked. Trump lifted his hand, motioning for silence. His voice echoed with command. "This is more than politics. This is about honesty, fairness, and standing up for the hardworking Americans who deserve better." In homes across the country, families watched in silence. A grandmother in Ohio whispered to her grandson, "This is why we never gave up on Trump. He tells the truth." The boy hugged her, confused but touched by her emotion. Back in the studio, the air was thick with tension and disbelief. Trump delivered his final blow of the night. Jeffre didn't just cheat the system, he cheated you, the very people who trusted him. He demanded that you pay your fair share while he stole your future. The crowd erupted again, though many cried openly, shaken by the injustice laid bare before them. In the press box, reporters whispered, some with misty eyes. Even skeptics couldn't deny the weight of what they had just witnessed. Jeffre lowered his head, unable to meet anyone's gaze. His silence spoke louder than any defense could. Trump spread his arms wide, his voice rising above the noise. Tonight, the mask has fallen, and together we'll make sure the swamp never cheats you again. Not now, not ever. The audience rose, clapping, weeping, chanting his name. The studio lights seemed brighter, as though truth itself had taken center stage. Jeffre wiped his forehead, but his sweat wasn't from heat. It was from exposure. Every face in the audience stared at him, eyes burning with betrayal. Trump continued, his tone firm and unyielding. Hakeem Jeffre claims to stand for the poor, but his condo screams wealth and his tax bill whispers corruption. He's taken millions in benefits while you, the people, have struggled. Gasps filled the room. A woman cried out, "My son couldn't get affordable housing because people like you took advantage of the system." Her voice broke as she wept openly. Jeffre's silence was deafening. The camera zoomed in on his trembling jaw and tightly pressed lips. He had no defense left. Trump turned toward the audience, his words slicing through the silence. This isn't just about one man. It's about a system built on lies. And tonight, we've torn the mask off that system. The chant started again, louder than before. Truth, truth, truth! The studio shook as ordinary Americans demanded justice. Across the country, phones buzzed nonstop. The clip of Trump exposing Jeffre spread across millions of screens within minutes. Families huddled around televisions, gasping, crying, even shouting. In the studio, emotion overflowed. A veteran stood and saluted. "Sir," his voice cracked, "I've paid my share for decades. I lost friends overseas. To see this man cheat the people, thank you for showing us the truth." His eyes filled with tears. Trump nodded, his tone softening. "You are the real heroes, and I will never stop fighting for you." Even the moderators, who had arrived expecting to corner Trump, sat speechless, faces pale, eyes shifting between the exposed hypocrisy and the emotion surging through the crowd. Jeffre shrank in his seat, staring at the floor as though he could disappear. His proud slogan, "Tax the rich," now rang hollow, mockery to a nation betrayed. Trump raised his hand like a conductor leading a symphony. America deserves leaders who tell the truth, not lies. And tonight, you've seen that truth for yourselves. The moment felt larger than politics. It felt historic. The crowd rose again, clapping, crying, chanting, "USA! USA!" The nation felt united, if only for one powerful, unforgettable moment. Trump's closing words struck like thunder. Hakeem Jeffre demanded that you pay your fair share, while he paid pennies on $1 million condo. That's not leadership. That's fraud. And tonight the American people saw it for themselves. He paused, letting the silence hold. We are fighting for honesty, for fairness, and for you, the forgotten men and women of this great nation. Together, we will never be silenced again. The studio erupted, cheers and tears blending into one voice. The weight of years of betrayal lifted as emotion poured out freely. Jeffre sat defeated, his hypocrisy shattered before millions. Across America, people nodded, whispered, even wept. Trump was right all along, some said. And as the broadcast faded, one truth remained undeniable. Donald Trump had revealed what others were too afraid to expose. The narrator's voice closed the night. If this moment moved you, if it opened your eyes, don't stay silent. Like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Tell us what this moment means to you. And most importantly, join our membership to support the cause and stand together in the fight for truth. Because together we are unstoppable.